Hello, more on the Dhammapada today. So we come to the section on the Buddha. It's a very beautiful section, hardly surprisingly. And the first verse says, "He who has finally conquered, the Buddha whose view is boundless, by what path can one lead him astray?" He who has finally conquered, the Buddha whose view is boundless, by what path can one lead him astray? So we know from earlier sections that the language of conquering and being the greatest warrior and so on turns up quite frequently in Buddhism. And I know that those terms don't really suit everybody, but they're very heroic. Here he is, the hero that has finally conquered himself, and that's the thing to remember. As it said in an earlier section, he who conquers himself is the greatest warrior. It's much better than conquering anybody else. And that is because really that's the only one we can conquer as well. And it means finally being free from all sorrow, gaining that total freedom that is free from any negative mental states. The rest of the verse I think is very indicative of what that means about one who has finally conquered. The Buddha whose view is boundless. And what does that mean? Boundless. He's got two eyes like we have. But of course we're talking about a much deeper view, not a literal view. But his view is boundless because he has no view. He doesn't need any view. And of course it's what is most deep in us is our views of the world, the views that we have of other people, and even more significant, the view that we have of ourself, the view that we have a self at all, the view that there is something, some essence of ourself that we hope will continue after death, or that we think will be blotted out by death. So, yes, all the views we have are what give us our great problems in life, really. So, the most interesting ones, in a way, are the views that we have of ourself in relation to other people. So all the comparing that goes on. And I've talked about all that before, so I'm not going to go into any detail there. But, basically, we have views of everybody all the time. As soon as we set eyes on somebody, we've got views about them, about what sort of person they are, about what life they lead, about what views they might have. And these are all total assumptions. We have no means of really knowing what's going on in another person. We don't even know ourselves, really, let alone anybody else, but we think we do. And this has the effect of separating us from other people, of creating a gulf, you could say, or even a barrier. Often it's a barrier, a brick wall that we set against other people. Or it's a completely different view. Instead of setting up that wall, we set up instead some very sticky relationship that we project onto that person, all sorts of ideal attributes and so on, which of course is the basis of falling in love with what we think is the perfect person, imagining that they're all sorts of things that of course they're not, but we would like them to be. And perhaps we haven't got those qualities, and so we'll look for them in somebody else. So I said that the Buddha hasn't got a view, and it's because in a way he can see everything. He has a perspective that's no perspective really, because he doesn't need a perspective. he sees things and experiences things very directly. I mean, what am I talking about? You know, I can only say how I imagine that it is, and I've obviously imbibed something about Buddhism that tells me something about what the Buddha experienced, and then I have to add to that my own experience and interpretation. Yes, so of course, this term, the Buddha whose view is boundless, also reminds us of the Heart Sutra, where we're told that the Bodhisattva basically is beyond any of the skandhas: form, feeling, thought, consciousness, choice. I mean, that's the version that we get in the puja. You know, that is what makes us up. That is what makes everything up. That's all there is. But actually, the Buddha whose view is boundless, like the Bodhisattva, is beyond all that. And we're being encouraged in that Heart Sutra to just give up any holding on, any idea that that's what reality is. You know, reality isn't those feelings that we feel so intensely, those emotions, those thoughts that we have. You know, they're empty, and they're empty because they don't have the significance that we give them, and they don't have any substance. They don't have any shape. You know, if you look for a thought, if you look to see where it arises or where it goes to, there's nothing to be found. So, you know, in a way, we need to enter that mystery and really penetrate into what is going on in our minds. You know, it's really a continuum of habits, the kind of thoughts and anxieties that we hold on to and that we give ourselves. By what path can one lead him astray? By what path can one lead him astray? Well, he isn't on any path. He doesn't need a path. And ultimately, we won't need a path. But because we've got so much to work with, we do need a path right now. And what the Buddha offers us is the Noble Eightfold Path. And maybe I'll say something after I finish the Dhammapada about the Eightfold Path. Might be a good idea. But the Buddha doesn't need a path, and he's not on a path. He doesn't need any structure. He's gone beyond any kind of views, perspectives. In other words, he is completely open and spacious, which is just what we would like to be, isn't it? Open and spacious. Imagine, you know, having no disturbing thoughts ever, and being totally loving, so that when we saw anybody else, they would be as precious to us as we are to ourselves. I mean, it's unimaginable, and yet we can lean towards it with well, in our imagination. You know, we know how disturbed we are by our unpleasant thoughts. Wouldn't it be great, you know, not to feel anger, not to feel jealousy, not to feel irritation? All those emotions that pop up all the time, you know, seemingly unbidden, and you know, they have a very big effect on us. So yes, he doesn't need any path. We can't lead him astray at all. And I really like this verse, a few verses on. It's hard to be born as a human being, and hard to live the life of one. It's harder to hear the true law, and harder still to be born a Buddha. So the true law just means the Dharma. It's hard to be born as a human being and hard to live the life of one. It's harder to hear the true law and harder still to be born a Buddha. So, this just reminds me that, well, how much we want a quick fix, how much we don't appreciate how difficult it is to train ourselves in a direction that's healthy and beneficial for ourselves. It is hard. It is hard to be born a human being because we've got a body and we've got a fragile body that gets ill, that gets old, that dies. So that is hard, and all the pain and difficulties that turn up in our life because of primarily because of craving, because we want things to be a certain way. So that is hard. It's hard to live the life of a human being. And it's hard to hear the Dharma because really we would like the Dharma to be what we would like it to be. We've got ideas about how we would like the Dharma to be. Or we read things and we're very good at being selective. We read something that, oh, don't like that, don't agree with that. And then we dismiss it. Or we read a bit of Dharma and you get really excited and we think, oh yeah, this is the truth, this is fantastic. But we're very selective, and it's good to see the ways that we are selective. So, yes, I once read something, I think it was Subhuti, who wrote that we should listen or hear the Dharma without lemons in our ears. And I thought that was a very good description because, we have very choosy ears, and those lemon, that rather sharp way of hearing sometimes when things aren't as we would like them to be, when they don't quite suit the way that we think, they don't fit in with us. So learning how to be open to the Dharma and really reflecting on those unpalatable bits that we would perhaps rather not know about. Of course we need to be discerning. Doubt is very important actually. So, without big doubt, there's no big faith. So, they're very closely aligned to each other. That we need to allow doubt to be there. We shouldn't grasp onto a teaching just for safety or security. As the Buddha said, we use the Dharma to row across to the further shore, but we don't carry the boat with us when we get to the further shore because it wouldn't be much use to us. So, but at the moment, we do need some quite basic teachings of the Dharma to help us, to really help us. Anyway, that's my ramble for today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.